Fall is just my favorite season for so many reasons, but especially reading. During the fall, I really love to lean into cozy fantasy reads, books about self-development and self-improvement because we're gearing up for the new year. So today I wanted to share some of my cozy fall book recs that you guys should definitely consider adding to your fall TBR. I would love to hear any book recs you guys have that I can add to my TBR. Before we get started though, I did want to share some tips if you're someone who wants to really get into reading or who wants to read more. This is the perfect season to lean into reading. It's the colder months, we're spending a lot of time indoors, and reading is such a valuable way to set a foundation for any type of change you want to make in the new year. Number one is to follow creators that post about reading. When you follow people that post about reading, you just inherently want to read more. You get interested, you get book recommendations, you get content that really romanticizes the process of reading. It just pushes you to want to read more. Start adding a bunch of reading vlogs to your watch later. If you guys have any suggestions for content creators that create content about reading and books, comment them down below. Next is to get a Kindle. I am gonna have to influence you guys on this one. I really do think the Kindle is worth it. I have the Kindle Paperwhite. My sisters got me the new matcha green Kindle for my birthday and I'm obsessed. Before this one, I had the older model of the Kindle Paperwhite and I'm a fan. I really am a fan of Kindles, even though I really enjoy having physical books and flipping, the sensation of flipping pages. Getting a Kindle is a game changer because at night when I don't want any overhead lighting on, when I just want to lay in bed and read, this comes so in handy. It's also really nice if you're a mood reader and you like to try out a bunch of different books, but don't always want to commit to buying a physical book because you can use sites like Ocean PDF, or you can connect your library card to your Kindle where you can check out books and actually read them for free on your Kindle. There are just so many hacks that come with the Kindle. It is so convenient and I love having one. It's really nice too because the Paperwhite's really small, so it actually fits in a lot of my smaller size bags, and sometimes I'll just throw it in a bag if I'm going to the doctor's office or if I'm out running errands. That way I have another option instead of scrolling on my phone. A part of my great lock-in has been not being on social media after 8 p.m. and my Kindle has really saved me because I have no excuse. Setting intentional reading times definitely helps make a difference. What this means is if you like reading in the mornings, instead of scrolling on your phone in the morning, set the intention that when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you're gonna do is play your audiobook or reach for your Kindle and read for at least like 5-10 minutes. Or if you're like me and you like to read at night, once the overhead lighting goes off, plug in your phone all the way across the room and start reading on your Kindle or pick up your physical book. Once you get in the habit of that, where certain times of the day you reserve for reading, kind of rewire your brain to associate those times of day with reading, and it becomes a lot easier for it to be a habit. A hack I really like is if you're working an office job on your lunch breaks, instead of scrolling on social media, bring a book with you and read. I started doing this because it's not the best look when you're just like in the break room and you're on your phone, and it just accidentally became a habit that stuck with me, and I was able to get through a lot of books just from that habit alone. And the last piece of advice is to read what you want, not what looks cool. It's so easy with social media to get wrapped up in certain books, especially just reading books that are considered more intellectual online. But reading is really for you. It's really what you take out of it, and it's really for your enjoyment and your growth. Only reading books that are popular online or books that are considered smart girl books by TikTok, it's really doing disservice to you. I think a lot of the times too, we think that the only books that we can learn from are nonfiction classic books that we were assigned in school. And don't get me wrong, a lot of those books have a ton of value in them, but there's so many books out there. You can learn so much even just from a fiction book. A lot of my biggest life realizations have come from just a well-written fiction book. Also, the more that you lean into just reading books that you enjoy, the more you're gonna actually want to continue reading. Those are just a few tips that I have to read more. Let's go ahead and dive into the fall book recs. First one is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. Sally Rooney has always been a hit or miss for me. I really liked Normal People, Conversations with Friends I struggled with, I could not get through Beautiful World, Where Are You? And with this one, it took my third try for this book to finally click for me. What ended up doing it for me was one of my close friends actually read this book and loved it. And that kind of forced me to give it a third try. I also feel like listening to it on audiobook really helped. This was just a masterpiece. I think this was genuinely Sally Rooney's best work. It follows two brothers. They have a 10-year age gap, and it really explores their sibling dynamic. That is the crux of the story. I love a book that analyzes familial relationships and bonds. It's one of my favorite tropes. Analyzing the sibling relationship is such an interesting lens to look at things because I think it is one of the most profound relationships in our lives. Our siblings are some of the people that know us the most in this world. But their sibling dynamic is really interesting because they have that 10-year age gap and because they kind of have this complicated, estranged relationship just based on their family dynamics. They're both in very unconventional relationships. Sally Rooney loves a good, messy, unconventional relationship. She's just really good at writing really unlikable, messy characters, and they just are really interesting to read about. They can be a little bit frustrating and hard sometimes, which is, I think, why sometimes I struggle to get through her books. But when I do, it's worth it. Let me know if you guys think I should read Beautiful World, Where Are You? Because I know people love that book. And honestly, after this one, I might have to go back and give it another shot. We're gonna jump around between genres. I have a nonfiction book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Now, I know you're probably thinking, this is so cliche. How many people have recommended this book? But let me tell you, this book was life-changing. I avoided this book for quite literally years. When I see a book that is this hyped, a lot of the times, especially in the self-development genre, I avoid it. I don't know what possessed me to pick up this book. I think I was just kind of in the mood to read a book about self-development and self-growth. I had heard so many amazing things about this book that I just heard one too many good reviews. I finally caved. I'm really trying to work on my systems and my productivity, especially during this period of my life. So I figured this would be a helpful read. I listened to this on audio and I flew through it in the span of 48 hours. And now I understand why people recommend this book so much. This book is really a simple, clear guide to creating effective systems that will lead to you actually developing habits and sticking to them. I really appreciated that this book was very clear and accessible. I think the reason why this book is so popular is because the messaging is so effectively clear. It's something that anyone can just pick up and read and understand. There's not a huge barrier to the access of the wealth of knowledge in this book. And I think that is really, really valuable. I was a political science major in undergrad. I love studying theory, but I think there is something so effective about creating a very simple, clear theory that the everyday consumer can kind of understand. Just because it is written in a very clear, accessible writing style, that doesn't really take away from the rich wealth that this book really provides. I would recommend listening to this as an audiobook. I think it's a great podcast listen. Taking your time with it and listening to maybe a chapter a day. I definitely didn't do that. I flew through this book because I was just obsessed from the minute that I listened to it. But it's definitely one of those books where I know for sure I definitely want to reread this in the future because it is one of those books that just has so many effective strategies on how to go about designing systems to optimize habits. One of my favorite times of the year to read historical fiction is in the fall and the winter, and this next read is the perfect fall/winter read. It is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. I read so many of Kristen Hanna's books last year. I'm making my way through her discography slowly but surely. I think once I finish reading all of her books, inshallah, I want to do a video where I review and rank all of her books because she has so many books. But I'm really taking my time because Kristen Hanna is one of my favorite authors. I love her books so much. I love her writing style. She does it well for me, and historical fiction is one of my favorite genres. The Great Alone takes place in Alaska, which the setting itself is very much giving winter fall. It's very cold and wet and the weather is just very dark and gloomy. The book really deals with the issue of PTSD. It follows this family that moves to Alaska because the dad is a veteran, and he's basically one of those like conspiracy theorists. So he believes that the government is going to take over, and I think it takes place in the 70s or the 80s. So he moves his whole family to the middle of nowhere town in Alaska, where a bunch of these people have basically come together because they all are conspiracy theorists and they believe the government is out to get them. It basically deals with him struggling with PTSD, the effects of it on his family, and it also explores issues of domestic abuse. Content warning for that. Kristen Hanna just writes about war in such an excellent, masterful way. You see the themes of the women and home front traced throughout this book, as well as a little bit of The Nightingale. This was just such a dark, atmospheric, cozy historical fiction read. This next book had one of the most strangest writing styles, and it is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. I actually read this in the spring because I think I read this right when it came out. Super random how I ended up picking up this book. My friend and I were in Heighton Ashbury just like thrifting and checking out a bunch of vintage stores. We found this bookstore that was really, really cute, and she was saying that this book has been on her TBR. I really liked the cover. Also, I found out it was by an Iranian author and he happens to be a poet. Poetry is like a core part of the story as well. I was kind of reading the description. It seems like it was written in a slightly stream of consciousness format, which sometimes I like, sometimes I find hard to follow. The main character is this young Iranian guy who grows up in Indiana. He's obsessed with death and the idea of martyrdom because his mother passed away in a flight that was shot down by the US. And so he's very fixated on this idea of death and martyrdom, and it's something that traces throughout his entire life. Really, really interesting, strange book, but also just very beautifully written. It took me a while to get through for sure, but it was definitely worth the read. Broken Country by Claire Leslie Hall is a modern day Pride and Prejudice. I love this book so much. It was witty. It was dark. The writing style of it felt very satirical. It takes place in England, and it was just honestly a really fun trip. The other self-development book that I have on this list is The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. The fact that I don't own a physical copy of this book yet is honestly criminal, because I recommend this book to anyone and everyone. I read this book last January, and I feel like this was such a great way to start off 2025. Mel Robbins is a podcaster, motivational speaker. She came out with this book last year describing the Let Them Theory, which in its very basic, most simple terms, it's this idea that you kind of just have to allow people and things to just kind of exist in the way the world is, but not kind of allow it to destroy your peace. That's to put it very, very, very extremely simply, but it's this idea of whenever something bad happens, whenever someone acts in a certain way, you just kind of let them and you let me. So you allow people to be who they are, and you don't allow that to really affect you in the way that a lot of us kind of struggle with. There's really, really effective tools on how to really implement that in all the different aspects and facets of our lives. So in the workplace, with our families, in dating and relationships, it is honestly such an effective theory and lens on how to kind of just live a more free life. And as someone who very much loves to protect my peace, I really enjoyed reading this book, and it covers a lot of issues that we struggle with, from overthinking to just like feelings of social anxiety, to struggling with perfectionism, to setting boundaries and healthy communication. Like, it just covers so many valuable aspects of our lives. Again, like Atomic Habits, this is a book that I definitely foresee myself reading in the future. And I really want to get into listening to her podcast, because she just has such a valuable perspective to learn from. This is kind of a throwback, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I think I read this book in high school. I want to say it came out in high school. This is by V.E. Schwab. I didn't realize either that I have a signed copy of this book, but this is a fantasy book that honestly I'm really tempted to reread this fall, because this was such a atmospheric read. It essentially follows this girl who's cursed by the devil to be invisible. So she's immortal and she lives for centuries, but no one can see her. And then all of a sudden in 2014, she is seen by this boy in a bookstore. Next is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I had heard so many amazing things about R.F. Kuang before getting into this book, but this book truly blew my mind away. This is a thriller in kind of a different sense. It's not like your traditional thriller read. It essentially follows this white main character who her best friend passes away in her apartment. She passes away leaving this unfinished manuscript of this historical fiction book about Chinese laborers. The white main character decides to steal the book as her own and essentially write the book over and pass it off as her own writing. This book was really interesting because it gets into a lot of analysis of just like inclusivity, diversity, and this idea of what makes a book own voices in the literary space. I feel like it came out at such a pivotal time too, because it came out during a time of a lot of people just kind of pushing for better representation, not only within the literary community, so like within like the author writer space, but also within the creator side of things, which both are very much interconnected. It's kind of a thriller because it's about this white author essentially trying to pass off this book as her own, the lengths that she goes to protect her identity, and just kind of her downward spiral of her starting off with good intentions and it just becoming more and more of an egotistical thing, and the things that she does, the ways that she sacrifices her morals to protect this lie. It's written in such a interesting, witty writing style. It really does raise a lot of questions and inner reflections about the current literary landscape. Yeah, this is definitely a Mando read. Last but not least, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I do want to say there are so many content warnings about this book. Definitely look into and do heavy research before reading this book. This was definitely one of the most disturbing books I have ever read, but also one of the most beautiful books that I have ever read. I did read it in July, which honestly might have been better for my mental health. It's crazy because this book sat on my TBR for quite literally 2.5 years because of how, just purely how long this book is. It's like 700 plus pages. I kind of want to reread this fall/winter. I feel like this would be really fun to reread and just see if this holds up. It is a book about 4 friends in New York. It spans over 4 decades-ish. It really just centers around the trauma that they experience. This book is really controversial because a lot of people make the argument that this book portrays unnecessary suffering, and I definitely see how that is definitely the case. I think for me, what I took away from this book was just the analysis on the human condition and the durability of human beings to endure suffering. There were just so many lines and passages that I marked and highlighted. It was one of the most beautiful books I have ever read. Very disturbing, and if you're gonna read it at any time of the year, I feel like the fall/winter. Give yourself a week, hole yourself up in your room. The day I started this book, I read it for, I think it took me 4 days to get through, and all I was doing was reading this book, eating and praying and sleeping. It was an experience and a half. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys are not already, I would love if you could take a second to subscribe. Let me know if you guys want to see any other book recs videos of what books are on your guys' TBR. I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!